Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Teen Life Skills class on how to rent and how to become a good tenant. And we have with us this morning Kim Stovall, and she is going to be leading our discussion today on how to rent and become a good tenant. A few things real quick. If you have some questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat or raise your hand and you can and we'll let you unmute to go ahead and ask it. Some questions are easier if you just ask. Versus typing. I know sometimes can take a little bit long. And we try to keep this to an hour, so we should finish by 12 noon Eastern time. If you are just getting here, if you can just put in the chat where you're from, it helps us to kind of know how far we're reaching. So I will go ahead and let you go ahead and talk, Kim. We thank you very much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. A little bit about myself. I have been in property management since 2011. I graduated from the University of Georgia with my bachelor's in accounting and found a job as a property accountant. Not anything I was looking for, but I started working for a small family firm and realized that property management was something that I was good at. It was like a puzzle to solve. And so I stayed in it for about a decade. I took a year off when I had my son, and now I'm back in it as a consultant for both property management companies and first-time investors or landlords. My goal is to help them run their business efficiently, effectively, and to be good landlords. I know there's a lot of situations where investors can do things and cut corners, and it gives them a bad name or a bad rap. And I want to help them do it the right way so that tenants and landlords have a good relationship. So that's kind of what I'm doing now and who I'm working with. But the best part is I worked in Athens, Georgia for the majority of my career, which means I worked with a lot of first-time renters, people coming to the University of Georgia who either stayed in the dorms for a year or moved out of their parents' house straight into an apartment, and they were first-time renters for us. They were finding their first home. They either did it with roommates they knew, or I do have experience with roommate matching, which are very different options for people as they look at their first rental home. So I just wanted to kind of give you a little background of where I came from and then kind of talk through how to rent an apartment. So yeah, I guess the first thing is like, what does it take or how do you find your first apartment? The best thing is to have a list of things that you know that you need. Personally, I live somewhere without a washer and dryer, and that is just a non-negotiable for me. I do laundry at weird times. I will forget about it. Still to this day, I have to have a washer and dryer if we are renting or anything. For other people, that's not a big deal. They don't mind communal laundromats. They can go make a Saturday of it, like whatever works for you, but know your have-to-haves in your apartment so that when you're searching, you know what to look for.
One of my have-to-haves is a dishwasher.
Yes. Oh, so true. My best friend, though, she will hand wash her dishes. She lived in an apartment with a dishwasher for a year, never used it. I don't understand.
Nope.
So yeah, understand what you want and what you feel comfortable with, because you are signing up to live in this home for a year. And if you know that you are not going to wash dishes by hand, you're not going to be happy there. And the landlord and you want to be happy in this arrangement. So have your list of things that you need in your apartment. Know if you have a pet or if you're going to have a pet. If you sign on to a place that is non-pet friendly and then find that you want to rescue a cat, that may be a deal breaker for your landlord and may get you in trouble. So you need to have some foresight for at least your lease term, which could be 6 months to a year, on what life changes you may be anticipating. Obviously, you can't plan everything, but just think it through. Like, is that something you're going to want when you're in your first rental home? And if so, find a place that's already pet friendly. And the other thing is think about where you want to be located. A lot of people will say that they want to be located, in the hot spot of town. They want to be walkable to different things. Other people will say they want to be out more in the suburbs where you can have a bigger yard. So again, think about where you want to be in town. And then most importantly, what is your budget? You need to think through how much money you're bringing in and how much money you can afford to spend on rent. Keep in mind that rent is not the only thing you'll pay when you lease an apartment. You may have to pay for some utilities. You may have, you'll have cable or internet, things like that. You'll also have to pay as well. So you'll have to come up with a budget on how much you want to spend each month. And once you have all that information, now you can start your apartment search. And honestly, you can call a property management company. You can let them know what you're looking for, and they will try to help find you a place that you would enjoy. They want to match you in some place that you'll be comfortable. So if you have those answers, you then can reach out to a property management company and they'll help you try to find a place. Renter's insurance, that is another one that you may have to pay. I would highly encourage it. And we can talk for a brief second about renter's insurance. Not all places require it, but I do highly recommend it. If something goes wrong, if there is a flood, if there is a tree falls on your car due to a windstorm, that's not covered by your landlord. If it's your personal property, you should insure it through renter's insurance. A lot of places have policies that you can couple with car insurance. It's usually, $15-ish a month, depending on what kind of coverage you get. I don't sell insurance, so I can't really give you good quotes, but it's an affordable option and protects you if things do go wrong.
I can say that the two places that I rented at required me to either have it on my own, or I paid them like $15 or $20 a month to be covered by renter's insurance. So I know at least in South Carolina where I lived, they required it.
Yeah, it can vary from management company to management company. I know in 2 of the companies I worked for, we didn't require it, but did strongly encourage it. And part of the reason we didn't require it is because sometimes especially with college students, who was our primary demographic, it can be a rider on the parent's homeowner's insurance. So it was something that could be separate and they could be covered by homeowner's insurance. So it was like this gray area, and we didn't want to make it harder for people to lease.
Very interesting to know.
Yeah, most parents didn't love it if they had to call homeowners insurance. That deductible was a bit more than renter's insurance. So still something to look into and to make an informed decision on. Again, the property management company can let you know their requirements for it, and an insurance agent can walk you through what options are available. There are people out there who do want to help you, and they can explain these things to you. If you reach out to an insurance agent, you have no obligation to buy from them. So don't be afraid to ask. That was something I had to learn kind of the hard way growing up, is I was like, oh, if I call them, then I have to buy it. And that is not true. You can call them, you can get information, and then make an informed decision on if you want to have the insurance or not. All right. So you have talked to a company, you have found out where you want to live. It is right in your budget. You love this apartment. You're ready to move in. What do you need to do? You will need to do an application through the rental company. Most applications do have a fee. Recently, there's been discussion in lawmakers on capping that fee, so it's not too expensive. It hasn't fully passed in all states yet, but there should be, it should be a nominal fee to apply to rent for an apartment. In the place you're renting from should have specific listed leasing criteria. These are the factors that they will look for each candidate and are standard for their firm. That means that if I go in and apply, or if you go in and apply, they're going to judge us on the same criteria. That criteria will change between rental companies, but most will include a credit score, an income verification, and criminal history. So those are the 3 main things that apartment complexes or rental companies will look for when screening for an applicant. Some may include rental history. And if you don't have any, that's not a big deal. Basically, they'll be looking to see if you have rented before, how that tenancy went, and if you were evicted or paid late or things like that. So not having rental history should not hurt you, especially if they look for other criteria as well. If you don't meet one of the specific criteria, so for example, if they say you need to have a 600 credit score, but you don't have that yet, they usually have an alternative way to qualify, which could include a guarantor or a co-signer. These are similar terms, but they are different. A co-signer is someone who will be on the lease agreement with you. So if I ask for, my mom to co-sign the lease, she is on there. She is typically a lease holder, which means she now has access to my apartment. If she is a guarantor, she is saying she guarantees the financial obligation of that lease agreement. So if I don't pay my rent, then they're going to call my mom and say, your turn to pay her rent. And my mom may not be very happy about that. But in turn, if my mom calls and says, oh, I want to get into Kim's apartment, she is not a leaseholder, and they will not be giving her a key without my consent. So slightly different and good things to know when getting into those arrangements with somebody.
Yes, that is quite helpful. So being a teenager, like 18, 19, sometimes they have those apartments next to the colleges where everybody has a bedroom and a bathroom and they share a common living area. I'm thinking that might be a great start for somebody, because I'm thinking for some of this age group, 18, 19, it would be beneficial for them to start looking and getting a job ahead of time so that they have some kind of employment history. Or is it beneficial like for them to get, like we get Discover card or we get college card applications in the mail for credit cards? And I've told my daughter, like, I think it would be good for you to get one just to help start establishing some of your credit, or maybe getting your phone put in your name, like on your own account, because I know that helps establish credit. Like there are some things that I know that are good to set up for at like 17, 18, like 8 to start establishing your line of history.
Yeah, I mean, looking at credit is something that is, that most rental companies will do. And even in a situation, so, we did the rent a room, share the living room situation. We had an apartment complex like that. And with that, the leasing criteria was still the same. You could qualify on your own, or in most cases, a parent did guarantee that lease agreement. So those are situations where the credit, you do have the option to build it, but that's not necessarily the be all end all. You have to do it if those are the complexes you're looking for. If you are wanting to start building credit, I would recommend getting just a general card. I wouldn't recommend, if they're sending you a mailer, it may not be the best deal for you. So do a little research. I like NerdWallet personally, or I think Google has a good list too. Like if you look up Google credit cards, they'll let you know who has good benefits and things. But they'll let you know like which one you can get the most benefit from using. And then the other side of it is when you're starting with a credit card, this is only for stuff you're already buying. Don't go get a Target card and now think it's free money because they do want you to pay it back. And so I really discourage getting store cards in general, because it does encourage you just to spend more in that store. So, get a General Chase card or a General City card or something like that. Put your gas on it, pay it off every month, and just stuff that you would buy anyway. Start small. If you find that you can be responsible with it, can build it, then you can start putting more purchases on there. But I wouldn't start there. I would start with, this is my gas card. This is only used for gas, or this is groceries. And I know I spend $100 a month or a week on groceries. Groceries are expensive these days. I don't know. So, like whatever your budget is, know it, stick to it, treat it like it's cash. And that'll help you build your credit score.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's like we covered a lot there. Are there any questions so far on how to get the apartment, what to do?
I was just going to add too, I think all applications have fees. So usually you need to look at what your budget is for some of that, because sometimes the fee is $75. I remember I rented a house with a friend in Florida and it was $75 for each person over the age of 18 that was going to live there. So, and I know some apartments, sometimes it's a $30 fee. Sometimes it's 75, sometimes it's 100. It all depends on, and if I'm correct, each time you do an application, they're going to pull your credit, right?
So it depends. It could
okay.
be a soft pull on your credit. So we never did like we would get a score through a third party, but it was never a hard hit for most people. But yeah, it is touching your credit. So if you have your credit frozen, we will, you do have to unfreeze it or things like that. But it's not the same kind of hard pull that it is like when you open a credit card.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. The three big things we had at my most recent job, we were looking for a 600 or better credit score. We were looking for no felonies within the last 7 years, and no evictions within the last 7 years. We found if you met those three, we didn't go through income verifications or things like that. But other places will do income verification. And usually it's 2.5 to 3 times the rent.
Yeah, the last 2 times in South Carolina, it was 3 times the rent. I was like, wow, that's a
Yeah.
lot. That's a
And that
lot.
is something you can ask before you do the application. You can ask people, what is your leasing criteria? Like, because if they tell you, hey, you need to have 3 times the rent, and you know that you don't make that, you don't need to spend the application fee. Like, they should tell you upfront what they're looking for before you spend that money.
Right, right.
Yeah. So I had a little blurb about roommates. So, like I said, we did roommate matching when you did the buy the bed leases, which is where you rented a room and had the common area. And these were some questions that we would ask, and I think these are good to ask for anyone who wants to be a roommate, or looking for a roommate. So, also, I have this Facebook memory that shows up. I was working on site at a condo complex that rented to students, and like, it wasn't a buy the bed lease. Like, 2 people got together, leased the whole place. And every May, this Facebook memory pops up, and it says something along the lines of, don't sign a lease with someone you met at the bar last night. Which brings back this great memory of these 2 people. They hung out, had such a good time that they showed up and signed a lease the next day. We then got to see them again at move-in, and they were no longer friends. But they have a whole year that they get to hang out in an apartment and pay bills together. So just, make sure you know who you want to live with. And you might feel like you're best friends, like, even, you've known each other since kindergarten, but there's still logistics you want to talk about and agree upon before you sign that lease agreement. One of the biggest one is cleanliness. Your mom's not going to be there to sweep. The rental company's not going to come in and clean the toilets. So it's good to understand what you consider messy and what they consider dirty. Those may not be in alignment with each other, and is one of the biggest points of contention in a lot of relationships and roommates. Another one that people don't think about is temperature. You are agreeing to live together, so you need to make sure you are comfortable in the same environment. That thermostat setting not only says how cold or hot it is, but it also tells you how much you're going to spend on that electric or gas bill. So you need to be in agreement on it. Another one is guests. How often do you like to have friends over? Is there a certain time that you don't want friends over? How comfortable are you if someone's significant other stays over and starts showering and using more utilities? These are all things to consider before you sign a lease together, and how to find if you're good roommates.
I would even say sometimes, like, if you have the couch, if you come into the roommate situation and you brought the couches or living room set, and then they're letting somebody sleep on it, sometimes you want to think of that too. Sometimes there's scenarios where somebody's sleeping on the couch down, and it's your couch that they're sleeping on every night, so they're wearing it out even faster. A lot of times there's things like that. There's little,
there's so many things that you'll get into, and those were the 3 biggest ones. And another thing to think about are eating and drinking habits. So some people like to let those pots soak all night, my husband, and some people wash them the night you cook. It's that is a lifelong battle that I have chosen to take on, but you don't have to do it for your year living together. And then, drinking, as people get older and age up, some people go to the bars, some people bring stuff into the house. You have to agree and respect boundaries of each other and make sure everyone's okay with your recreational habits. And then finally, a big one is bills. How are you going to divide them up? Is one roommate taking on water and one roommate taking on power? If there's a difference, how are you going to reimburse each other? And then, super important, what's going to happen if someone can't pay? If you signed a lease together and it's not an individual lease, and say your roommate can't pay, you're both on the hook for that money. And you've got to decide up front what's going to happen, because if it doesn't get paid, then you're both going to be without an apartment. And that's just a hard fact and one of those difficult things to talk about. Like in our culture, we don't talk about money up front, and entering into a lease together is one of the situations you do want to bring up money and make sure that y'all agree on how things will be split.
Yeah, very important. I know as a grown adult, my ex-husband and I and my daughter years ago, we shared a house with another friend who she was getting divorced and she had 3 kids. So we had a room for all the kids. We put all the kids together in a room and we each had our own room. And we split this and we split that. And then it was figuring out who was going to be paying for groceries, like how we were going to handle groceries. And it was just interesting because we never rented as grown adults, as families coming together to help each other. So, Riley, you said sensory, candle scents, etc. Yes, those are important things too.
Oh yeah, if there is something that you know about yourself, that, oh man, I can't stand the smell of vanilla, I personally love it. But like, if that is you, make sure they know that and make sure that's a boundary that they are willing to respect. And then that's something you can reference if something comes up like, hey, that candle really bothered me, like the vanilla made me sick. It may be something they don't realize, and, be willing to communicate. That is another thing that I found in property management that was super difficult, especially with first-time renters, is they didn't want to talk to each other. And that is the number one thing that you have to do. You have to say, hey, this is a thing, and let's talk through it and let's work together for a common goal of harmony living together. It can't be combative and me versus you, but how do we all work in the same direction of having a harmonious living environment? All right. So we've got roommates, you've got the people you want to live with, you've applied for the apartment, you are ready to go. You're, got the forms, it's happening, but we're going to take a pause and we are going to read that lease, because trust me, your landlord has. First thing I did whenever we got somebody who hired onto our firm, we all sat down and read the lease together. I have read the same lease agreement at least 500 times, and I have read at least 500 different lease agreements. Read it, know it. If you have questions, ask. The lease agreement is the most important part of renting. It's the document that sets all the expectations between your relationship with your landlord. It says what the requirements are for both parties. Keep in mind, it will be more blatant about your requirements than theirs, but it is telling you what they will and won't do. So, for example, if it says rent is due on the 1st, that's when it's due. You've agreed to it. You said you would pay by the 1st. There might be a grace period that the landlord has agreed to. So say, hey, we'll give you till the 3rd to pay before there's a late fee, but it's still technically due on the 1st. So you have till the 1st, you pay on the 1st, you have till the 3rd till there's a late fee. Doesn't mean it's due on the 3rd. So that's something that it's nuanced in due dates, but say they want to find you in default of your lease, paying on the 2nd, they could say you're in default. Typically that's only going to happen if they're already looking for other things that have been going wrong. But those are good little small things to think through and read through. The agreement should outline the terms of the lease. So like when it starts and when it ends, the amount due each month, when it's due, how and where to pay. So it might say that you can pay online. It might say that you have to pay, by a check in office. That one's outdated at this point. It might say you can't pay cash. That's a big one that most landlords have moved to, is they don't accept cash. And it should clearly state where you're renting. So if you are renting by the room, it should say, you're renting this address, this apartment, this room, or, a room in this, and y'all will have, common areas that you split. It should also outline rules and expectations for the community that you're living in. So, when the pool's open, when the pool's closed, or things of that nature, and how to submit a maintenance request. So it might state that you need to submit your maintenance request in writing through your tenant portal. That means calling it in may not count. So those are all little things you need to know through your lease term. They are outlined in your lease agreement, and it's good to know that ahead of time. The other side is there may be additional items added on to the initial lease. Those are called addendums, and they may be more rules and requirements, so such as needing renter's insurance, or it might say that when skateboarding, please wear a helmet. It can go all sorts of ways. So read it, know it, ask questions if you're unsure, and ask, if you really need to go through it or want to go through it page by page, ask them, hey, like, let's go through this lease agreement, make sure you know what you're signing. They do. All right. So I feel like that was a big blurb there.
Yes. Let me add something to that. So I was in one apartment, just so you guys know, it's good to know this stuff. I lived in one apartment complex. I lived in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment. And then I moved to a townhouse that was 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, right? So I moved in the same complex. So I was transferring, okay? When I had already had a dog, and I had already paid a pet fee, but when I transferred, I thought that the whole thing just transferred, right? Later on, probably about 1.5 years later, I'd given the dog to a rescue because it was old and blind, and it needed a yard. It needed something better than I could give it. And it was just like, I've never done that before. It was the first time I ever did that. But a friend of ours gave us her cat, and the upstairs bathroom, the tub was peeling away, and so they needed to come in and resurface it. And so I didn't know when they were doing. I knew they were doing it at some point during that week. And I thought I had already paid the pet deposit when I lived in the first apartment 4 or 5 years ago. Well, come to find out, they called me and said, hey, our crew's in there to resurface the tub, and there's a cat. And I went, oh, yeah, I mean, there's a cat, so everybody, all humans and animals, needed to be out of it. So they put the cat downstairs in the downstairs bathroom and had it safe away there for the day. But then the next day I got a notice on my door that with the bill for $200 for a pet deposit. So I went, oh, I guess that didn't transfer. I didn't know that it didn't transfer from one to the other. So it's kind of important. It would have been a great question for me to ask when we did all that. So it makes sense. It didn't transfer because apparently it was ending a lease and starting a new lease. And so it was a whole new lease agreement.
Yeah. Another thing that can happen is a situation where it's not necessarily a pet deposit, but a pet fee. A lot of times they'll use the phrase non-refundable pet deposit, which means fee. They just don't want to say fee. And so it's charged for each animal in each unit. And it is a fee. Animals do cause more wear and tear in the unit, things like that. And it's to incentivize owners to allow pets. So it's not, in an ideal situation, there wouldn't be fees, but unfortunately, to incentivize owners to take on more wear and tear in their unit, they do want a little compensation for it because you can't charge for wear and tear at time of move out.
And I will add, when I rented a house with a friend, that friend that we rented a house with, we had a dog at the time, and I paid the pet deposit. It was $250. I remember the pet fee, and it was $250. And then within that first week, our pet died because it got out of the fence. It got hit and it died. And it was very sad. And my friend said, you should call the landlord and see if you can get your deposit back. And so I was like, no, it's already done. And then I was like, I'll give it a try. She kept saying, but $250 is a lot, and you could put it towards something else. And I was like, okay, you know what? And so I did. I called him and I said, I know we just paid this. We just moved in, but the dog got out of the fence and got hit by a car. So he said, yes, we could get it back, but he had to come and inspect the property. So he did. He came and he did a walkthrough to make sure that I wasn't hiding a dog or anything around. I had the cage outside, and I had dogs and food bowls, and I even offered to give him the food. Would you like to take the food? Because I wasn't going to need it. So, it was very nice that he did that. And that was my only time actually working with an independent landlord, not part of a company. So, it was possible, and it was nice. And I have to understand as his tenant that, yes, you can come and take a look at the property and see the pet's no longer here. So
yeah,
I see that.
Yeah, no, right of entry is a phrase that's going to be in most leases, and that does give the landlord the right to enter the unit during business hours for ordinary business purposes. And so that's a good thing to know about in your lease too, that when you sign it, you are saying it's okay for the landlord to come in. Those purposes could include showing prospective tenants for the next term. It can be for maintenance. It can be, hey, we heard you had an unauthorized pet. We're coming to take a look. So you typically do give your landlord right of entry when you sign your lease. The other side of that is it doesn't hurt to ask, as long as you are coming to your landlord or management company in a sincere and kind way. I think that's what shoots a lot of people in the foot, for lack of a better phrase, is when they come in demanding it. People are just less likely to help you. But most of the time, again, like landlords and tenants, they want to have a good relationship. It is a relationship. And I have found most property owners and landlords want to help if they can. There are a few people who are just like, nope, the rules are rules. But most people are like, oh man, that is a bad situation. How do we make it better? And that's if people are coming in and asking and being kind and genuine. So that's just life advice there, not even 100% into leasing. If you are calling a business and you're like, hey, I need help. People want to help as long as you are kind and nice with them as well.
Can I piggyback on the kind and nice for a second?
Definitely.
So I will just give you all a couple of hints. A couple of things is, I think when I rented and I lived in an apartment, I realized that I was living where these people were working. Like every day they were coming to my home, like their work, like the complex was my home. And so they were coming to my home to work. And so I knew that they were going through different things in life and having to be at work every day, from an 8 to 5 and having to have the schedule sometimes is grueling. So I was the nice tenant. And it does help if you look at them as like they're coming to, like, your complex is like your home, so I would bring them extra food. If I had extra food that I took home from an event, I'd bring them a meal. One time I cooked for the maintenance guys. I made breakfast for all the maintenance guys. I made a big old tray, aluminum tray with eggs and bacon and sausage and toast and stuff like that. And I brought it to the maintenance shed and I fed them breakfast one morning. If I sometimes, those people in the office, they might just want to talk or see something, and if I had extra sodas, I go down there and bring them a soda. Here, y'all want a soda break, and we chat for a minute, and just chat and say hi so that they get to know you, so that if something ever comes up, they know you. And they don't just know you from seeing you, like they know who you are as a person. And that makes a huge difference. I was the one that would get the notices that say, oh, our financing company is coming and we'd like to walk through your apartment since they know me. And I go, yeah, sure. And I clean and put everything up real quick, but I was the kind that I understood that the whole, like, I ended up being the pool monitor. Like they asked me to be the pool monitor at the complex, and that gave me $300 a month off my rent, during the pool season. So like there are some benefits to being a good tenant, if something happened or something, like I was the one, like they knew that they knew who I was. So just bringing them up like a cake, at the store, if you buy one, get one free, bring that one that you got for free up there. It didn't cost you anything, sodas, drinks, or anything like that. Just bring them up something and just say, hey, I just want to drop this off to you guys, because that really gets them to know you. Sometimes they just like to sit and chat for a few minutes where they're not working and they're not dealing with somebody who's a tenant and they're not dealing with the complaints and issues, because that's what they get like all the time is the toilet doesn't work. And this light, I would have a light bulb that go out and I didn't know how the heck to fix that thing up there because I didn't install it and I didn't know how to undo it. And I tried for the life of me and I couldn't do it. So it helps to be proactive like that.
100%. And it could be something as simple as a thank you card. Like if you had a tough problem, like if you called in, you're like, hey, I don't know what to do with this problem with my roommate. And they're like, well, here are some options, or, hey, happy to sit down and mediate with y'all. Whether that mediation went good or bad for you, a thank you for your time, a simple card. It goes a long way, because one thing, and especially if you're working with a property management company, they're the middleman between the tenants and the property owners. And their day is 100% problem solving. It is trying to make sure rent's paid, making sure the bills are paid, make sure the pool is cleaned. Oh no, somebody, stole the net from the soccer field. And so not only do you have to replace the soccer net, but you have to then deal with all the tenants that are upset they can't play soccer today. Like it's problem solving and figuring that out. And so knowing that you've helped someone goes a long way. And then the flip side is when there is a complaint about your apartment for some reason, noise complaint or maybe a pet visited. Maybe we are a little slow to go check it out because I know for a fact that, that tenant wouldn't have an unauthorized pet. So, it doesn't hurt to be nice. Doesn't hurt. And so I guess before we run out of time, I did want to talk a little bit more about security deposits and damages. And then we can take a few questions if that works for y'all. So the security deposit is a sum of money, usually equal to 1 month's rent, that you will pay prior to moving into a unit. This money is held through the duration of the lease, and acts almost as insurance for the landlord against damages that may occur in the unit. At time of move out, the landlord will do an inspection and compare the state of the unit to the state at which you moved in. So there will be a move-in inspection, filled it out, you wrote down anything you saw that was wrong, you and them signed it. And when you go to move out, they're going to take that same inspection, go and mark down any differences. Not all the differences are damages. Some are wear and tear, but some may be damages. And this is a tricky thing to talk on because there is no legal definition of what is a damage. There's also no legal definition of what is normal wear and tear. So there's this huge gray area of what it is that they can or cannot charge for. And so the best rule of thumb is using was the item used for its intended use. So for example, a wall's intended use is to hold up a roof and a ceiling. It's not actually intended for you to mount your TV. So while that's a perfectly acceptable thing to do, everyone mounts their TVs. When you remove that mount, you probably have large anchor holes. So you need to talk, or you need to refer to your lease agreement, your security deposit agreement, or talk to your landlord on if you are responsible for filling those anchor holes. And if you fill it, do you need to sand and paint it as well? And does that paint, can you match it by just that little area? Or are you painting a whole wall? So that's how it kind of has scope creep into what can be damages and why that's such a tricky thing to talk on. But if you're leasing from anyone, really ask for their security deposit or move out policy when you move in. So you'll know exactly what they should be looking for. You can have a better idea of what you're doing and if you're doing something that may get you charges at the end of it. And then at the end of the lease, your security deposit should be fully refunded to you, less any damages or fees that were outlined in the agreement. For example, they might have in the lease agreement, you're going to pay a professional carpet cleaning fee at time of move out. They'll just deduct it from your security deposit. You'll get security deposit less carpet cleaning fee. So again, read that lease, know what you're going to be paying for. And then there is a lot of law surrounding security deposit refunds. It varies from state to state. So I don't want to say blanket statement, this is how it'll work. But most cases, security deposit should be refunded within 30 days. I know in Georgia and Tennessee, you have to refund it via check using USPS. You have to send it through the mail. That doesn't mean you're going to get it in 30 days. It means they have to postmark it in 30 days. And then it's up to the mail to get it to you. So many little caveats there. There are resources online. You can find all the security deposit laws online if you are curious or have questions. There are also things where it's the landlord tenant handbook. You are welcome to read through that. That is one person's interpretation of the law. It's a great resource. It'll break things down for you, but it is not the be all end all, nor is that 100% how a judge in every county is going to interpret it. So there's a lot of wiggle room in that. But basically, security deposit, you'll pay it up front. They're going to hold it in escrow until time of move out. At time of move out, it should be fully refunded to you, less any stated fees in the leases or damages. So that's the short of it.
Very good. And I will just add, because we have a younger generation renting, I dyed my daughter's hair blue one time. And I don't know, I must have gone insane because I had this thing. I don't really do unnatural colors in hair but I dyed her hair blue. It washed out of my tub because she showered in it often, But when she went to her father's house, she took a bath over there, and it made the bathtub blue, and he didn't use that tub after that. He didn't really, it was two bathroom house. And so when he moved out, he didn't realize that the tub was still blue, and they charged him $400 to resurface the tub. So there's certain things you want to pay attention to, like here, and I will tell you, because I have had foster teens, foster teen girls. So hair dye you want to do, sometimes it's like, we do that stuff outside, because that first wash or something, if it's red or if it's blue or if it's purple or black, will get onto the surface that you're washing in. So just one thing to keep in mind, like if you have a roommate that is going to get their hair dyed or doing a home hair dye, like keep track of that's a damage that they're, make sure that they fix that.
The other
One
thing
of those
is,
things I thought of.
yeah, no. And I mean, the biggest thing too is also cleanliness at time of move out. I know some people are like, oh yeah, like, it's cleaner than when I moved in, but unless you have it clearly documented that it wasn't clean and they, can prove it that no, this oven has been dirty for a year. I never used the oven. You probably need to clean the oven. And that's one that gets people all the time, is they just don't think to truly clean an oven. Right now, if I moved out, I'd be charged for my oven. They get dirty. They're a pain to clean. I get it. But you have the option to either pay for it or to clean it. So yeah, that is my, how to lease in a nutshell. Are there any specific questions or concerns that y'all want to talk through?
All right, if you have a question you want to put in the chat, you can. If you'd like to unmute, like Riley, if you had a question at all, or if anybody else has a question, you can feel free to unmute and go ahead and ask.
Is there a difference between privately renting and the property renting?
Definitely. There are different laws that govern it. If a landlord has fewer than 10 units, typically they aren't restricted by certain laws and rules. They can they have a little more freedom and flexibility, but still you should sign a lease agreement, even if you're renting through a private person. Personally, I've rented both ways. I've gone through complexes, I've rented from individuals. And as long as you are signing the lease and agreeing to the lease, everything should be the standard and should be the same. And so is there anything in particular you're curious about between the differences, or
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know how to word it because I'm in a different state, but they have 70 apartments as a complex, but then they put in their own like private rules.
Like rules for the community?
No, for the apartments, but then the state laws, so it contradicts the state laws.
So that's difficult without a specific example. If you wanted, I don't know if this is kosher, but if you wanted to email me afterwards, specifics, I'd be happy to help you with that. But ultimately, if you've agreed to it in a lease, that is the agreement you have, unless it is, violating other laws. So like, for example, you can't sign a lease agreement that violates like ADA. Like you can't be like, I agree, it's cool to not have wheelchair ramps. Like that's not okay. You can't do things like that. But I guess it kind of comes down to the specifics of what the rule is and what the law is. Like if they're saying you can't smoke inside, even though smoking is legal in the state, that's okay. They can say that in their private property.
All right, I have an example. So they said I'm not allowed to have exterior lights. Excuse me. Yet certain tenants are allowed to have external lights so that they can see their parking spots.
It might depend on the type of light. So I know that we had communities that were governed by a condo association. So kind of another layer outside of property management. You have the people managing the or the individual unit and releasing it. And then you have the HOA or condo association who are making rules for the entire complex. In that situation, they would say you couldn't have Christmas lights outside if it wasn't December. Like that was their rule. And if you had Christmas lights up and it was January, there were notices, there were warnings, and then there were fines. So it might depend on the type of light. If they have like a camera and it has a spotlight that's looking on the parking spot, that is different than having, you know, festive market lights. So it kind of depends on those rules. And again, in your lease agreement, if you agree to follow the covenants of the HOA, it might be in there and you may want to ask for a copy of those covenants.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. I wish I had more specifics for you, but that's kind of the general idea.
I was thinking that some complexes have quiet hours,
They do.
you know, so it's important to know like what those quiet hours are.
Yeah, especially if there are internal hallways. I think, you know, if anyone stayed in a hotel and like someone comes home later than you and they're running down the hall, it's so loud in your room. That is the
Yes.
same in complexes with internal hallways. It is rough.
I had the first apartment and the stairs, and it was an internal hallway. And the big complaint that people said all the time was that it was noisy online. I was looking online, and so the people said it was noisy. And so I just figured, you know what, some people have varying degrees of what's noisy and what's not noisy. Like certain complaints, I think you have to kind of learn to read through some of that. Like with some people, just any noise is noisy. And I thought, it doesn't matter. And I kind of liked having an internal hallway because it just kind of like gave more protection. I think first, I just didn't feel like I was walking right at, you know, just had more climate control. It actually, I think in the winter time, it increased our space because the kids, you know, like during the day, I'd let them go out with the baby doll stroller or something down up and down the hallway or something like that they could do. And it wasn't cold.
Mm-hmm.
But my apartment wall, my living room wall was right next to the ascending stairs. And we had Greenville Tech students. We had 4 football guys that shared an apartment catty corner to us. And they would run up those stairs. We called them was like horses, running up the stairs, running down the stairs, running up the stairs, running down the stairs. And so for me, I just made a choice that it really didn't matter. I mean, they were teenagers living in their first apartment. And I was like, you know, but sometimes they'd be like, y'all, it's quiet hours. Like, don't forget, sometimes there's quiet hours. One of the things to know, like our apartment complex, the whole reason I picked it is because they had trash pickup from the door. So you could put your trash outside the door and pick it up. And I knew that that was going to end up being my job. So for me, it was worth the extra $15 in to not have to carry my trash all the way down to the dumpster, which I think is an important thing to think of when you're renting a place. Like where, you know, because some people you've seen them put them on the roof of their car or the hood of their car or something like that, and they take their trash off to the dumpster. So we had it so that it was sitting outside the door, and 3 times a week, if you put it outside the door on certain days, they'd come and get it, and they'd come and take it off. It was a trash service. So that was a great benefit that we had that not everybody had.
Any other questions or strong feelings?
Anna, do you have a question? I just know I saw it light up. Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, thank you very much, Kim. We are actually at our hour mark. So I'd like to thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yes. And if you want to put your email, I don't know if you emailed Riley, or if you want to put it in the chat, you can, or if you want to just send it personally to Riley, you can.
If anyone has questions, feel free to reach out. Make sure I spell everything right. There you go.
There you go. Thank you. I appreciate it. All right. So thank you so very much for such a great lesson and knowledge on this, because I do know this is vital stuff for us to learn, because we're not all home buyers first off, and renting is a very common thing. So